2026 NBA season has already revealed a lot, making it clear where some teams are headed after years of going nowhere. A few teams finally escaped being average and took a real step forward, while others have sunk even deeper, with their top players stuck in bad situations that help no one. With the trade deadline coming up fast, this season is unusual because there are more star players than ever who could realistically be traded. That leads us to today's video. Today, we're breaking down 6 star players who clearly need to be traded this season, not just for their teams, but for their own careers as well. Before we get into it, though, a surprising number of people watching right now still aren't subscribed to the channel. So, if you like the content, think about hitting the subscribe button, because it helps the channel a lot and it's genuinely appreciated. Now, with that out of the way, let's get started. The first star player we'll be talking about today who badly needs to be traded is Anthony Davis of the Dallas Mavericks. The idea was for Anthony Davis to be the main piece of a championship team built around defense, but that vision completely failed, and Nico Harrison has already been fired because of it. Even at his peak, Anthony Davis was never able to lead teams on deep playoff runs by himself. His real success only came after joining LeBron James in Los Angeles, where he thrived as a dominant second option. Now that Davis is 32 years old and will turn 33 before the season ends, his injury issues are even more concerning. His overall impact is clearly declining, and there's really no reason for Dallas to keep holding on to false hope anymore. Yes, they're sitting in 11th place in the Western Conference, just one spot away from the play-in tournament, but they're still 3 games back, and the Memphis Grizzlies ahead of them actually look like they're figuring things out. Because of that, chasing the play-in doesn't seem realistic, or even worth the effort. Meanwhile, Cooper Flagg is already showing signs of becoming the star Dallas drafted him to be. At this point, it's clearly in everyone's best interest to trade Anthony Davis for as many assets as possible to secure the team's future and fully commit to developing Cooper Flagg. Davis is still putting up around 20 points and 11 rebounds per game, so he hasn't completely fallen off yet. On top of that, he remains a strong interior defender, so he can still clearly help teams that are trying to make a real playoff run and already have a solid core in place. But Dallas is simply too old right now, and getting younger should be their top priority, which makes trading Anthony Davis the obvious move. The next star player who desperately needs to be traded this season is Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. At this point, it almost feels repetitive to say, but Giannis has been under constant scrutiny ever since the Bucks were knocked out in the first round of last year's playoffs. And judging by how this season has gone, the pressure around him and the team has only grown stronger. Giannis has repeatedly said he's committed to leading Milwaukee, while also making it clear that he still wants to compete for championships. The harsh reality, though, is that this Bucks roster is no longer good enough to put the right level of talent around Giannis to actually make that happen. Their payroll is completely maxed out, and they have no real assets left to trade because they already burned them all on desperate all-in moves like the Damian Lillard trade. And despite that, the Bucks are sitting in 11th place in the Eastern Conference with a 15-20 record, not even good enough for a play-in tournament spot. Simply put, Giannis is way too talented to have what little prime he has left wasted, especially now that he's 31 years old and the championship window is clearly closing. For Bucks fans, accepting this reality would obviously hurt. But Giannis delivered the franchise its first title in 50 years, so the relationship should end with nothing but respect and gratitude on both sides. Giannis has dealt with injuries this season, but when he's been on the floor, he's still putting up around 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists per game, bullying his way through the paint and scoring like he always has. Superstars at his level almost never hit the trade market, which is exactly why the Bucks should be able to demand a massive return in any deal they make. That would finally allow them to start the rebuild they clearly need. The next star player who desperately needs to be traded this season is Zion Williamson of the New Orleans Pelicans. And yes, this is another situation that feels completely worn out. Zion's time in New Orleans has been hanging by a thread for years now, and everyone is tired of hearing the same excuses and stories on repeat. Zion came into the league with unmatched hype, potential, and expectations, but he has spent more than half of his team's games in a season only twice across the 7 years he's been in the league so far. Injuries have followed him everywhere, and he's almost never available when the team needs him the most. The Pelicans haven't won a single playoff series during the Zion Williamson era. After finishing 14th in the Western Conference last season, they now sit dead last in the conference at the time of this video. When Zion showed up to training camp this year looking slimmer and in the best shape of his career, there was real optimism that things might finally change. Instead, it's been the same story again, with Zion constantly in and out of the lineup and the season feeling over before it ever truly began. At some point, the Pelicans have to accept that this core isn't leading them anywhere. And with Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen already flashing serious potential as rookies, they have enough young talent to shift their focus toward a full rebuild. Because of that, moving on from Zion Williamson is much easier to accept right now. It's not that Zion is bad when he actually plays either, since he just had 3 straight games of 30-plus points. The problem is that he simply can't be trusted to be the franchise player the Pelicans invested so heavily in, and that belief has clearly proven to be wrong. At this point, a clean breakup is best for everyone involved. With only 2 years left on his current contract, it's also not a long-term deal that would scare teams away if they want to add scoring at the power forward spot. The next star player who desperately needs to be traded this season is James Harden of the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers are arguably the NBA's biggest disappointments this season. After finishing 5th in the Western Conference last year, they went all in with aggressive win-now moves, clearly believing they could compete for a championship. Instead, they've completely fallen short and are now sitting in 12th place in the West, outside the play-in tournament picture. The worst part is that they traded away nearly all of their first-round picks through 2030 to build this roster. That means they can't even tear it down and rebuild because tanking wouldn't benefit them at all. That's why they're still pushing forward right now, desperately trying to claw their way back into the playoff race. But everyone knows James Harden has never been shy about asking out when the situation around him isn't good enough. And with Harden having a career resurgence this year and performing at an elite level, he can't afford to waste any more seasons at this stage of his career, especially at 36 years old. He's averaging 26 points per game, the most he's scored in a season since leading the NBA in scoring back in 2020. On top of that, he's adding 8 assists a night, doing everything possible to carry this team's offense. Kawhi Leonard has been excellent when healthy, but it's understandable why people doubt his ability to stay on the court consistently. I don't see any scenario where Kawhi gets traded this year, mostly because teams won't want his contract given the injury risk. But Harden is playing incredible basketball right now and deserves the chance to make the most of the final chapter of his career. And finally, the last star player who desperately needs to be. The last star player who desperately needs to be traded this season is Domantas Sabonis of the Sacramento Kings. The Western Conference is full of disappointments this year, and the Kings are fully joining that list. They're currently tied with the Pelicans at the bottom of the standings, despite trying hard to stay relevant with a roster that looks good on paper, but fails to click on the court. Sabonis is supposed to be the guy leading this team, but he's a tricky player to truly build around. While he's undeniably great in some areas, his weaknesses are just too glaring in others. He's a dominant post scorer with a deadly face-up game and exceptional court vision and passing skills for a center. He's also been the NBA's top rebounder 3 years running. But at the same time, he's a really poor interior defender. He also isn't someone who can reliably or consistently space the floor, never attempting more than 2 3-pointers per game in his career. In today's NBA, you can't struggle in both defense and shooting. You need to either be a lockdown defender or a dependable shooter. The Kings ended their playoff drought in 2023 but have steadily fallen further from those heights ever since. At this point, they've reached the limit of how much leeway is acceptable. The Kings should be one of the biggest sellers at this year's trade deadline, and Sabonis probably needs to be the centerpiece of the players they move. And with that said, that's all for today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below on which players you think should be traded the most.